I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. We have the first ever NFL female coach on the show today, Dr. Jen Welter. Jen wasn't exactly invited or recruited to take on the historic role. There was a specific why not now moment when she took an unexpected step that paved her own way to making history. She shares exactly how she made this happen, and it's the type of tip we can all learn from. We discuss what it was like when Jen played men's professional football, as well as her coaching experience. What was the locker room talk like with the guys? How did she manage the dynamic between herself and the guys? Who were her mentors that championed her? Jen's story has applicable lessons for us all. She's a 5'2", no BS woman who reminds us that just because something hasn't been done before doesn't mean you need to ask for permission to do it yourself. Just ask yourself, why not me and why not now? Before we hop into this episode, let me fill you in on a little secret of mine. That's Headspace. It's a guided meditation app, and I never imagined that doing something for 10 minutes a day could increase my quality of life so much. I've always struggled with knowing when to make things happen versus when to let things happen. Sometimes things go very well when I push on the gas, and sometimes not so much. It gets me into trouble. Headspace has helped me with learning how to trust my intuition. And I've tried meditation off and on for years. It's never stuck, but this time it has. I've made a very intentional shift in my morning routine, and that's to wake up, have my coffee, do Headspace, journal, and then I check my email, my social media, all of my devices. It's been a big shift, but great result. My aunt used to say, don't let anything rent space in your head for free. That's valuable real estate. Headspace allows me to be a much better landlord of my thoughts, especially first thing in the morning. You can go to headspace.com/why not now for a free trial. And if you stick around to the end of the show, I'll tell you how you can get a month for free. Dr. Jen Welter, welcome to the Why Not Now show. How are you doing?
Well, I just kind of asked myself, why not now? Why not today, right? I'm doing really well.
Awesome. I love it. It's very exciting to have you on because your story is so unique, and I'm sure everyone is interested in how you became the first NFL female coach. But backtracking a little bit more, will you share a little bit about your journey and what brought you to right now?
I would love to, because I tell everybody it was never anything I envisioned as even being possible. And so it's nice to see kind of an evolution of females in football. I grew up loving football, but never had an opportunity to play. When I got to Boston College, I found rugby and I fell in love. And I played for all 4 years. I was recruited to the under-23 national team. And yet for the second time in my athletic career, actually, a recurring theme came up, and that was that I was too small. I got recruited to the under-23 national team, but they said I was not big enough. And so that was kind of a tough point for me. And I think a lot of us face that, is that time when everybody tells you you're not what you thought you were. So I decided it was my time to grow up and be an adult and get that real job. And so I was working as a corporate headhunter, but playing flag football on weekends. And the general manager of the Mass Mutiny called my flag league and asked if there were any girls playing flag who they thought could play tackle. And Angelica, who ran the league and was my mentor at Boston College, said, "Oh, yeah, we have exactly the right person for you." And so I had this opportunity for an open tryout for this women's football team. And here was a sport that I had loved my whole life, right? I grew up in Florida. I mean, football is a way of life, and yet had never had an opportunity to play. Yet in the back of my mind, I still had this, gosh, what if they tell me I'm not big enough? And it was this fear. And I would tell anybody that because I think we all have those defining moments in our lives that, we wonder like, gosh, can I do this? Can I step out? Can I even try? And the decision I came to in my mind was, I'd been told many times that I wasn't big enough, even going back to being a little kid playing tennis where I thought I was going to spend my life. And I had gotten through those things, even though they were disappointed. But the one thing I didn't think I could live with was wondering what would have happened if I just tried out for that football team. And now a lot of people laugh when I say that, but it really was a struggle that I remember all too well. I just didn't know if I could handle it if the sport I had loved my whole life told me I didn't belong or that I wasn't big enough. Obviously, that motivation of wondering and knowing I couldn't live wondering what would have happened or what if prompted me to go and try out for the team, which thankfully I made it and was blessed with just a phenomenal women's football career with, the women who have become my family and definitely my backbone. We were all in it for all the right reasons. Here were these women were literally playing football for no money, and the belief that women could, should, and would play football no matter what, sleeping on couches, shoveling snow off our fields, and doing all those things just for the love of the game. And so I played women's football for basically 14 or you could say 15 years, just depending on how you count it up. And in that time, I played the majority of my career for the Dallas Diamonds. We had just a blessed team. We won 4 championships in 04, 05, 06, and 08. Then I went on to play for the first and second women's national team, the red, white, and blue. Again, something that I never thought was possible because when I started playing, there was no women's national team. We went over to Sweden in 2010 and then Finland in 2013, won 2 gold medals there. And then from that, I was recruited by the Texas Revolution to play a season on their men's team in arena football, which was one of the craziest but most rewarding things I've ever done and survived. And it was from that team that Wendell Davis, former Dallas Cowboy, saw the relationships that I had with the players. And he was coming in as a new coach in 2015. And he said, "Jen, you have to coach my football team." And I said, "Oh, no, absolutely not." Said, I never thought about being a football coach, and you want to throw me right into coaching men's professional football? No way. And he said, not a lot of guys are going to give you this opportunity. You're taking this job. And so I like to say that Wendell saw something in me before I even saw it in myself, because what he told me is, I can teach you how to coach football, but I can't teach somebody to have the relationships that you do with those guys. And you are truly part of the team and one of the guys. And that was actually what caught his attention. And I went from the Texas Revolution to the Arizona Cardinals. So it has been a wild ride, but one that was, more than I could have ever imagined. And I'm most proud of, being somebody at the forefront who is not playing for myself. And we always say that in football, you've got to play for something bigger than yourself, but playing for all the girls and women who have ever loved the game of football like I did and maybe didn't see a place for themselves there, and all of the women who have been doing what I did, playing for $1 a game with gold in their hearts and doing the right things, even if nobody knew we existed. So that's kind of how I got there.
Incredible. And we will dig in a little bit more into some of these facets of your story. I can't wait. But in the spirit of why not now? Can you think of a time? I'm sure you can, but pick one where you had that decision to make and you could either tackle it, no pun intended, or not. And you had to ask yourself, why not now? And let's talk it through that day, that moment, kind of zoom in and dissect it.
Amy, I love your question of why not now, because I think for many of us, it's also why not me? And I don't think women are necessarily good enough of that. And so I would encourage all of us to be willing to step up into your destiny and take those defining moments. And two of the biggest for me would have been when I agreed to play on the men's team, and then also when I went to the Cardinals, because both were obviously big risks. But when I went to play on the Texas Revolution, I really struggled with that decision because, they wanted me to play running back, first of all, and I'm not a running back. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a great linebacker, but, I tackle people. I don't run away from them. So it was a struggle of a decision. And I remember talking to two of my very best friends and my sisters in the game of football, Alberta Fitcher Bryson and Odessa Jenkins. And they were the two people I told. And Odessa looked at me when I told her. I said, OJ, I think maybe you should do this. Like, you're a great running back and maybe you'd be more successful. And she just looked at me and she said, Welter, you can't hand off your destiny. They chose you for a reason. And it was so selfless and so profound all at the same time. And I think that that's what a lot of us struggle with. But that really solidified the decision for me to, step out from the women's game and step into the men's game. Because what I realized is I wasn't just carrying my own destiny, I was carrying the destiny of a lot of people who believed in me.
Wow. So that conversation, and I love that it's OJ that you're speaking with. When you spoke with her and she said that she responded to you and said, you can't hand off your destiny. Was it that moment that it clicked and you said, that's it, I'm doing it then? Or did it take a little bit longer for you to commit, especially knowing this wasn't your typical position that you're playing?
Well, Amy Jo, I had already committed, but it wasn't public. So I think that that's the difference. When I sat in the Revolution's office that day, they didn't want it to be a real shot and a real tryout. But I said, absolutely not. If you want me to do anything with your football team, I either do it 100% step for step for all of training camp, or I do nothing. And it was at that moment that I really changed the conversation, because I wasn't going to let them just use me as a publicity stunt. I was putting all my cards on the table, and it's nothing that I had even thought was a possibility before I walked in the office that day. But I hadn't told anybody. And I think that a lot of the times we struggle with that. We might make a decision, but until we have other people that we love and trust that are on board and they kind of can hold us accountable, that there's still this back out factor. Nobody would have known if I'd have changed my mind and chickened out and decided I wasn't going to play against men. But knowing that I had the love and support of my sisters in football, that really solidified the decision for me.
And if we fast forward to the next why not now that you mentioned, when you get this opportunity to go to the Arizona Cardinals, what did that moment look like? What did that day look like? Did the Bidwells call you up? How did you find out, and what were you doing?
That is the man that is Bruce Arians. This was me and him, and he said that publicly, and obviously he got the amazing support from the Bidwells and Steve Keim and everybody in the Cardinals organization. But, it started when Sarah Thomas was hired as the first full-time female ref. And Sarah and I have laughed many times. We're like, man, our destinies are tied to the end of time, which is great. But when she was announced, somebody asked Bruce in a press conference if he could ever see a woman coaching in the NFL. And the beauty of Bruce Arians is he pulls no punches. He'll always tell you what the truth is. And Bruce said, absolutely. The second a woman can make guys better, she'll be hired. And I was actually coaching an arena at that time. And so I had the conversation with my head coach and, Devin Wyman, he said, Jen, he's like, we should call Bruce. And I looked at him like he was crazy because, I had never even spoken to a coach in the NFL, and you want me to call one of the 32 most brilliant minds in football and say, hey, you should hire me. And he just kind of said, could you get his number? And I thought, well, I don't know. And so I went home and I thought about it. And I guess the why not now would have been then, because I picked up the phone and I called the Arizona Cardinals on behalf of myself, as if I wasn't myself. That day I was not Devin's assistant coach. I was his assistant. And I worked my way to Bruce's assistant, at which time I told him, that Devin had heard that Bruce said, a female could coach in the NFL, and he wanted Bruce to know that he had a female coaching on his staff. And Wesley, took the message and he said, I think Bruce would really want to talk to you, but we're getting ready for the draft right now. And, time's a little tight. I'll have him call you back. I thought I had gotten blown off, but I was really proud of myself that I was even, gutsy enough to call. So
let's pause real quick right there because, and just dissect this for a moment. So you call the Cardinals as the assistant to your boss, not the assistant coach, but the assistant, and speak on your behalf, but you're not yourself. So
yep.
That is awesome and to be commended. And why not, right?
I even asked Wes because he's fantastic and really has been a solid advocate. And even after I'm not there anymore, he's been a great friend. And I asked him one time, I said, Wes, did you know it was me that day? And he said, no, I didn't. I was like, oh, okay. I thought you maybe saw through it. And I said, when did you figure it out? And he just laughed. And he's like, I'm not sure. But, I was going to let you slide. And I just started laughing.
But in the level of risk here, what was the worst thing that could have happened? I mean, it really was pretty brilliant, well set up move, because if there were some sort of fallout, it may not even be tracked back to you, but it could kind of, just be considered and dismissed. But that's so cool to know that you fought for yourself. You were first encouraged by probably I'm going to call Wes a mentor. Maybe he wasn't, but I'm guessing he was some sort of huge champion. And
I mean, Devin was, yeah. I mean, Wes just, Wes facilitated it and he was great that day, but Devin definitely encouraged me too. And then, Amy, 2 weeks later, I walk into practice and Devin is larger than life. Now, that's saying a lot since he's a 6'8" former NFL player. So this is not a basketball 6'8". This is a D-line 6'8". And yet that day he was elated. And he said, you will never guess who I talked to yesterday for about an hour. And I just looked at him. I had no idea. It'd been a couple of weeks. And he said, Bruce Arians. And he wanted to know about this girl. And, from there, Bruce invited me to go out to go to the Cardinals facility and to meet him at a practice. And, we just hit it off. He's such a lovely man. Like, he really is. He's just, he makes you feel like you've known him your whole life, even after talking with him for 2 minutes, because he's so open and honest. And, I felt like, man, I would have loved to play for this guy. I would have run through a wall for this guy, And at the end of the day, he basically said, there was a coach at Hines Junior College when he was coaching who was one of the best receivers coaches he had ever been around. And her name was Dot Murphy. And he said the fact that it's no better for women in coaching now, that has to change. And he said, I think that the Cardinals are the right organization. We have a great diverse coaching staff. We have a great organization. And we have good men on this team. They've all been handpicked because of the high character guys that they are. And I think that this is the right situation and you're definitely the right woman. He said, but if we do this, it's going to cause quite a ruckus. But if you're willing to step into the chaos with me, I want you to know that we could do something great. And he said, I don't know yet if I can make this happen. I have to get a lot of yeses and a lot of people on board. But I want you to trust me and I want you to know it's in my heart to try. So there was nobody but Bruce. I didn't bang down doors of every team in the NFL. I trusted him, and it was on the strength of his character and the support of everybody in his organization that this happened. And that's why, if nothing else, I personally think that he's one of the best champions that anybody could ever ask for.
And I do want to talk a little bit more about mentors and male mentors. But first, just kind of circling back and looking at the situation, a view from 30,000 feet. So first of all, because Bruce mentioned that he would be supportive of a female coach in that press conference or whatever that interview was, and that was heard once and then shared with you, and you really were never invited to go and do this. You drove your own way by making that phone call, and encouraged, definitely. But I think that that's just a huge takeaway here, is that this wasn't a, hey, we're looking for a female coach, or hey, we're recruiting you. It was you putting yourself in that line of opportunity. And that's huge. And the whole why not me is critical, I guess, in thinking about that question that you asked yourself. Also the back out factor, mentioning, sometimes we, and granted, this was back with your example with the Texas Revolution, but to not give ourselves that back out factor. I know sometimes I intentionally stop myself from even having that option by kind of cornering myself into moving forward by, telling someone or being accountable, even knowing when, if I do this, then if I block myself from going backwards, then I have to go forward. But
and Amy Jo, we all have those moments of weakness and those moments of insecurity. And I think that too often we don't address that. People would say, oh my gosh, she's fearless. She played against men and this, that, and the other. Well, that's not true at all. Just because one area of my life I didn't live, without fear, it doesn't mean that in every area of life, you feel superhuman. And I would encourage anybody who's listening this to realize that being human is something that we all are. We all have our own areas of strength, and we all have our own areas of weakness. The best thing that we can do is be willing to bet on ourselves at certain points and to surround ourselves with people who see the greatest potential in us and want to help us. Not the people who would break us down or live in fear or tell you what's not possible, but those who would help you find what is, and it's human to have that back out factor. Mm-hmm. We all do it in certain areas. So please, to anybody who's listening, don't think that you're alone in that. My dad used to say that true bravery was seeing danger and proceeding anyways. It's not seeing danger. Mm-hmm. It's not thinking that there's no possibility that you'll fail. But, just like when I tried out for my first football team, everything throughout my life had showed me that I wouldn't make it, right? I was too small for tennis. I was too small for rugby. You don't look like a football player. You're not this, you're not that. Everything I couldn't, shouldn't, and wouldn't do, those things would have led me to not try out for that team. But imagine now how rare that looks when people see the career I ended up having in football. And so I would hope that anybody would take that and put that into their own spirit. Just because you failed 1,000,000 times doesn't mean 1,000,001 can't be different.
Yeah, very, very important point, and so applicable to everyone in their lives, not just this specific, very unique story. And there was something that I heard in researching you a little bit, and this was a video. You were telling a story about a time when Jesse Armstead had told you. So Jesse Armstead, correct me if I'm wrong, linebacker coach, former linebacker, and he was at the Giants, I think, at the time.
Oh, he's one of the best linebackers to ever play the game.
And so he calls you, or he's talking to you, and he said, and I think he called you baby girl. Baby girl, you're changing the way guys look at females and what they're capable of. I just listened to my players talk about how seeing you play with men made them believe that women could truly do anything. And when I heard you tell this story, I was on my treadmill. I pushed stop and I replayed it. And it really struck me, and I get goosebumps even thinking about it, how important that was for him to tell you that, but also just in general, he was listening. And for that to come full circle is so important. But what did that mean to you? Or what were your thoughts when you heard him say this? Did you already know that? Was that motivating?
I definitely didn't. I think too often, we look at things maybe from our own eyes and not from the eyes of others. I had definitely been encouraged in the messages that it was sending to young girls, in that anything was possible. But what I hadn't thought about is the impact that it had on guys.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we have to realize that a lot of the times, in any type of empowerment setting or any time that you challenge what is a social norm, it's not just in the group that, would normally rock with you, right? Like in terms of other girls, but it changes the way guys see girls as well. And I think that that's really powerful because, whether it was playing with guys or having guys talk about it or even coaching them, it really does change the dynamics of, how not only girls see women, but how guys see women as well. And that was a really powerful moment to me. And it changed the way I thought, because I think my focus was too narrow. And it was definitely a blessing to see that, you could impact not only how girls see themselves, but how guys see women as well.
That's huge. And I think that's something that we often don't think about, the role that guys play in this scenario of trying to reach equality in whatever form, whether it's professional, sports, personal. And so that was a big moment, and kind of expanding onto that. So when you're working with all these guys, here you are, 5'2", you weigh what, 130, and you're a coach. You are in this scenario where there times where you felt that the guys were threatened by you, where I'm sure at times you were treated differently, but just that dynamic, they were having to get used to it. Of course, you're having to get used to it. Yet at the same time, you've been playing this sport for so long, it's your second nature. Can you talk through a little bit about that uniqueness and of dynamic, and just maybe, are there any stories that come to mind?
Well, with the Cardinals, it was like a dream come true. We came together so well, and the guys were so receptive. They would come up and they'd be like, "Man, this is so exciting. Coach, this is history. Do you realize, like, this is history? It's never been done before." And I think that vibe really was a part of the culture that we had with the Cardinals. And it was something the guys were really proud of and they rallied around. And I think that was very special. For me personally, I know that one of the biggest compliments an athlete can give another athlete is when they say, "Man, I checked out your game film." And that was something that a lot of the guys told me going in. Because they're like, "Man, coach, I watched your game film. Like, you were a beast out there. Like, you were relentless off the edge." And, that meant that they had invested time and care in me. And so that really made it pretty easy. Kevin Minter, who's one of our linebackers, did an interview, and it was interesting to read because he said his biggest fear was not would it change kind of the culture? Because we are the crazy ones, right? It's a carefree group. And the other one was that, oftentimes first year coaches, not even male or woman, just a first year coach, it's like they kind of try and over talk to find their place. And he said, she never did that. It was very natural. And that was something that was important in my philosophy with them is, if I can help you, I'm going to help you, but I'm not going to just talk to talk. I want to earn your respect, not tell you have to respect me. And so we just had a really great vibe and a very jovial, like these are my brothers, they all know they could call me to this day, kind of vibe. And I think having a doctorate in psychology was a good part of that because, we are jokesters. And I would tell them, I'm like, listen, you guys, if you want to go there, please do. But don't half step with me because I have a doctorate in psychology and I mess with minds for a living. So I will win, And so we really just did have a very carefree vibe. And anytime anything would kind of be awkward, my favorite phrase was, you do realize you said that out loud, right? It was never about something being wrong. It was about, it's not that they don't want you there. It's just that they may not know how to deal with you or they're not used to it. And so, we had a lot of funny moments, but it was a lot of fun. And that I think would be something that most people didn't expect is just really how unbelievably awesome it was. I think in arena, it was maybe a little trickier when I was playing on the team because, not only did you have to prove that physically you could take the hits, but also that you could be in the locker room. And, the goal wasn't that I go out there and rush for 1,000 yards. It was literally like when you take the very biggest hits that they have for you, will you get up and do it again or are you just going to quit? And I took many a big hit and it took those to prove to them why I was there, that those reasons were right. And that it also took moments of just rolling with the punches and laughing along the way to let them know that they could be at ease. One of my favorite stories is literally we were going from one drill to another. And one of the coaches said, hey, running backs, do you have your balls? Well, we can see where this is going.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are many of those, right?
Right. And, one of the linebackers is like, yeah, coach, all but Jen. I said, that's all right. Maybe when I need some balls, I'll just take yours out of your wife's purse. And, that was it. Everybody starts laughing and joking. And then they saw that, I wasn't going to be shaken by something like that. Like something, you could joke with me, but I'm going to joke right back. If we're going to go there, let's go. And those kind of things really let them know that, we're more alike than we are different. And once you find that, and it changes the dynamic. And I always say, in terms of a male-dominated environment or what I like to say, winning in the boys' club, when they revert to their 12-year-old selves, when they will laugh and joke and even fart in front of you, you have won. You are officially part of the boys' club because they're not walking on eggshells anymore.
It's so true. And having an older brother growing up and being around all of his friends, and it's this kind of nod of acceptance, and you're in, and also blending in and not making a big deal, I guess, of it. A couple of weeks ago, one of my mentees, who's 12 years old, her name's Alina Valdez, and I saw you reshared this, Jen, so I know you are aware of what I'm about to say, but she plays flag football. And Alina, so she's 12, she started when she was 11. She was the first girl on her flag football team. And then now there have been many that have kind of followed suit. And she says, when they say I play like a girl, I tell them if they were a little better, they could too. And she's exactly right. I mean, she is rocking it, and her stats are just as good, if not better, in most cases better than the guys. And she just doesn't ask for an invite. She doesn't, even wait for that. And I think that that's a very similar situation to your case. And if you're waiting for that, you'll never really get the opportunity. It's truly about taking the initiative. And your point about the guys acknowledging that they were a part of history too, because they were involved in this scenario with you at the Cardinals is maybe another key takeaway. And thinking through, I'm such a big supporter of men mentoring women. Most of my mentors are men. And it's because I've worked in pro sports most of my life, or at least sports and entertainment. And, that's another upside to them, is being a part of change and being proud of that is key too. So you mentioned Angelica back in Boston and a few other mentors, but if you were to give any advice out there to guys and women, when it comes to mentorship and sometimes the hesitancy for men to mentor women just because of perception, what would you say to both men and women who do want to be a part of shifting the norm and moving forward in a progressive way?
Go with your heart. If you are in a position where you see that you can really change something and you can be a part of something special, do it. It's not easy at times, but when you find that it's the right thing, it'll be the right thing all the way through. People often talk about like me coaching the Cardinals. Let me tell you, those guys coached me every single day. They looked out for me every single day. And there's not one aspect of what we did in Arizona that works if everybody wasn't on board. If they wanted to make it a fail, it would have been a fail, no matter how good I was, right? Or being the right person. If those guys didn't want me there, they could have made it a fail, but they didn't. They chose to embrace the situation because, of, yes, it being a part of history. I think of, them knowing the kind of guy that Bruce Arians is. That's the ultimate seal of approval. Bruce doesn't mess around, right? If he's going to bring somebody in, it's the real deal. And be willing to create a legacy in not only what you do, but really looking to what you help other people do, because that's where you have the opportunity to create real change in our society. Me going and coaching in the NFL for the time that I was there was great. But what's greater is what comes after that, is looking to see the opportunities that it creates for other people. And that's where, you really change the game. And I would say that to anybody, look for those situations where you can be the one to create the change. That Bruce Arians, I like to say he bet on me, but, he bet his career on me, because if for some reason something had gone wrong, that could have followed him, just like the fact that it went so right did. And so, for all of you out there, realize that somebody has to be first. And in a situation where, there aren't a lot of points of entry, you have the opportunity to be that change.
And with that and looking at firsts in general, so, your world right now, most of your conversations are likely stemmed from or revolve around you were the first female NFL coach. I asked, social media, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, I asked everybody, do you have any questions for Jen? And one question was interesting, and it was from this woman who said, is she ever tired of the focus being on the first versus just playing the role, doing the part? And I'm asking that in two parts. Your thoughts on that, but also, we're potentially going to have a big first in our country with the first, just even having a first female presidential candidate in the general election. what are your thoughts on that as well? So first, kind of scooting back to, does it ever get old? Do you ever just want to push forward beyond that? Yes, I know I am the first, but let's talk about this. Or is it maybe the opposite? It gives you that platform, obviously, to talk more.
I feel really blessed to have the platform that afforded me. And sure, there are times when you're like, wait, but I've done all these other things. That's not the only dimension. But the goal is, when you get your foot in the door, to figure out what to do with it. And so I like to say that women's football was the best kept secret for years and years and years, because nobody knew we existed, even though we were doing the right things. So being the first has given me an opportunity to circle back and say, hey, look at all these women who are playing the game of football. Look how awesome they are. Yes, this is where I came from. People want to know my story. This is where I came from. These are all my sisters. They're great in this game, and they deserve, all the love, respect, and support we can possibly give them. So I guess it's both, but I wouldn't have it any other way, because I just hope that I'm a person that can take that opportunity and do as much good as possible. And that's when you say you're not playing for yourself, you're playing for everybody. Like in football. Hopefully I can be a great lead blocker, meaning, I opened the hole and now other people get to run through and score and continue that. And that I can, hopefully represent all of the women I played with very well, and continue to highlight the fact that the men in the National Football League are better than most people give them credit for. And that all of these things, it's not my story. It's the story of a lot of incredible people, that if I can share how positive it's been, then hopefully that translates not just into football, but into life for a lot of people. So that's kind of how I look at it.
If we, touching on other things that you've accomplished, one of which is getting your doctorate in psychology. So with that being said, how do you keep your mind healthy? Nice little transition over to that topic. Is there anything that you do on a daily ritual basis that helps you keep your mental health in check?
Yes, working out is my therapy. It always has been, in one way or another. If I'm not working out and giving myself that energizing part, I'm definitely not the same person. I also get energized by the people that I'm around. And I know that, I'm a very much of an extrovert in that sense. It energizes me to be able to lift other people up, whether it's, coming on your radio show, or getting out and speaking to people, or going and connecting with kids. Those things energize me, because it reminds me what you're doing it for, right? What is the ups, downs, the trials, the hard times, what justifies those? And it's the other people that we come in contact with. So working out and being able to lift others up, those definitely keep me sane.
What are your thoughts on sports and meditation, and athletes and mindfulness?
I think that everybody, especially depending on your sport, you have a different mentality and mental place that you need to be in. But the greatest athletes in the world are those that can live truly in the moment, not the next play, not the last play, not when I do this will be, not who's watching, or any of those things that are not in your control. It's truly the ability to say, what do I need to do right now, in this second, to be great? And when you can live in that moment with that pure focus, you're unstoppable. It's like that little kid you watch playing basketball for the first time, dribbling a basketball, and the whole world lives right there. Doesn't matter if 1 million people are watching or if he's all by himself. That focus is the same. And I think when you can return to that, and be in that mind frame, that's the zone. That's when we're perfect. And People have different ways of getting there, but that's something I try and remind athletes I work with all the time.
Yeah. And how do you teach that? I mean, because that is a part of what you do, right? Is work with teams, athletes, and help them in terms of, the psychology aspect of what they're doing. What are some of the things that you do to help facilitate athletes being present?
A lot of it is working with kind of those voices in your head, right? That self-talk. And, you can only hold one thought in your mind at a time. No matter how smart you are, no matter who you are, your brain can really only hold on to one thought at a time. And so the more you get in tune to that, the better you can be present and be in the mind frame for success. And so when you tune in to being able to listen to that and to correct it and to bring yourself back into being present, then you're unstoppable. But you have to really be willing to be self-aware and to examine what's going on.
Very interesting. Yes, it is so heavy cited in terms of the mentality and performance and success and that connection. So as we just think about the future, Jen, and actually before we get there, so all these questions came through, and I think I've tackled, no pun intended again, most of them. But for giggles, I have to share this one from my mom when I posted on Facebook that I'd be speaking with you. And she said, what does Jen do if the players backtalk her, if they're smart asses? But asses wasn't actually spelled out. She had a little asterisk, of course. And the fact that she used backtalk as a phrase cracks me up because she used that a lot when I was little. But have you had those situations where guys are just totally testing? And what'd you do?
It's funny that the level of professionalism, like in the NFL, is so high that that's probably more rare than you would seem or that you would think. But the trick is to not let them see that they can get under your skin, right? Like if they would backtalk, I would joke with them. I think most of the time people think that if somebody yells, you have to yell louder. Sometimes the best way you can do it is with a whisper. And, you ever whisper to somebody and you hear that they lean in? I think that it's all in your approach. And, I would joke back with them. So if they gave me some, I'd give it to them too. Mm-hmm. But I never had anybody openly disrespect me as a player, and that I'm really proud of. Because as coaches, the best gift you can give somebody is to make them better. And when they know you care about them and that your focus is making them better, they might not always want to hear it, but they become a lot better at absorbing it. And so I would tell anybody to just continue to help them and to show where your focus is, because and to take certain things with a grain of salt and realize that a lot of backtalk is actually just people's way of communicating and humor, and to not take that personally. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of being tested, especially in a male dominated environment, is can they shock you, right? Like, if somebody says the F word, and I'm not talking about football, will you say, oh my gosh, you can't use that word? Because now they know how to win, right? Like if a word gets you out of your mind frame, then anytime they want to get you out of your mind frame, they're going to say the F word. And, like I said, it's not football. So, maybe you throw the F word right back at them and be like, come on, you can do better than that, And a lot of dealing with that, I think, is staying really even keel and just laughing a lot. And that's always my way of handling it. Sometimes I call it being strategically stupid. So you don't actually acknowledge the fact that they were being difficult and you just keep it moving. And then they literally have no power over you because they can't affect you.
I love this. So much of what you're saying applies to me in my household right now with my 12-week-old puppy and whispering back at her all these things, and ignoring kind of. But thank you for answering that. And I think we should bring back talk back as a phrase that we drop here and there. Thanks, Mom. Looking forward, okay, what's next? What's going on now, Jen? Do you have anything that you've been thinking about doing that maybe general manager of the universe that you've been wanting to do that it's time to ask yourself, why not now? Or maybe you've just started something. But let's talk that through, because you're checking boxes here.
I have so many projects that I'm really excited about. The momentum has definitely shifted in terms of some of the things that I'm working on. I've been doing a lot of motivational speaking, which just energizes me, and it's really fun. But through that motivational speaking, it's opened up the opportunity to write a book, which I'm working on, and I think will be really great. And it's a lot of these great stories with, kind of those takeaways and motivational messages throughout. So that process is definitely interesting, humbling, challenging, frustrating, and exciting all at the same time, because it's a world that I haven't tread in before, which I think anybody would say it's like, it's like having a new boyfriend, right? Like everything's new. So you find those things that you love, those things that you don't love, those things that you thought you wanted. And maybe you go, oh my gosh, am I even cut out for this? But it has been a really, really great process, and I'm enjoying it. And I have a great team around me, so I think it'll be exciting. I also, I find that in difficult situations, sometimes, Amy, when you're pushing really hard in one direction and it's just like you're not making any progress, sometimes instead of not working, you just have to shift what you're working on, right? Like if you're just coming up with roadblocks on every front in one direction, try something completely different. Shift your mind for a little bit. Give yourself some success. Get yourself re-energized. And with that, I literally took just recently, within the last couple weeks, an idea that I'd had for a children's book that I've wanted to write, and I just started doing it.
And was this sorry to interrupt you, but was this as a result of hitting that roadblock with the current book, or what did that day look like? Were you
Not at all. Like that book is going really well. It's just a different vibe.
So walk us through that day where you just decided to start doing it. Was it a very intentional thing? Did you just kind of dip your toes and then all of a sudden decide, okay, I'm going full blast in this direction? How did that go?
Well, I was working on I want to do camps for girls in football because there really aren't many out there. And I'm just really passionate about girls getting access and having fun. And I was working on trying to do that. And the person that I was working with was we were just butting heads. And I was feeling like my vision was getting lost and I was getting frustrated. And it was like, no matter what I said, it was, there was conflict. So I just decided to push that aside. And I looked at one of the notebooks I had, and it was this kid story that I had just been doodling on. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to make this happen. And I went online and I found, a place where you could collaborate with other people who were really creative. And I found a writer who I liked his style. He did, comics. And I approached him because it was a contractor site. And I said, I have this really, cool idea. Would you be interested in working on it? And I hired him, within half hour. I laid out, my doodles and notes, and I really had no idea how to structure a kid's book. I knew the flow. I knew a lot of it, but I didn't know from a writing standpoint. I was like, every time I would look at it, I was a little bit overwhelmed because I had more questions than answered. I knew what I wanted to get accomplished, but I'd never stepped into a kid's book before. So within a half hour, I hired him and we were off into the races. And he was like, send me all your notes. And he was like, I'll read through them. And within a couple of days, he, had ideas. And it was just this great, creative, collaborative process. And, now the book's probably, 90% written. We're kind of in the rough draft stage. And now I'll have to look to, what does it take to get a book illustrated, and, would it self-publish or any of these kind of things. But it's a really creative, refreshing, fun project. And I kind of always tell people that sometimes you have to go back to your inner child and that time when, you thought everything was possible. And instead of finding reasons why you can't, you find reasons why you can. And that's what this children's book has been for me. I still have a long way to go, but it's really fun.
That's awesome. And just the quickness, the velocity that picked up when you started flipping through your notebook, then researching online, and you find the right person, and it's just like the stars
and
were
realizing
aligned.
I have to have all of the answers on my own. That it is okay. As athletes, and I am the worst one at times, and this is something I work with my athletes on, we are taught to never admit fear and never admit weakness and to never ask for help and all of these things that make it very isolated. And, I'm the queen of it. I'm a 5'2", 130-pound girl who was one of the best linebackers in the women's game for a very long time. So I certainly couldn't ever let anybody see any crack of anything but complete, invincibility on the field. And so unfortunately, what happens is when you become so good at that in one area of your life, it becomes really tough to then look at another area of your life and say, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think a lot of us get kind of that paralysis by analysis, because when we don't have all the answers, but we don't want to admit that we don't have all the answers, we get stuck. In this case, it was much easier to find somebody that I didn't even know to just ask him the answers, because you know what? He wasn't going to judge me. Unfortunately, he knew exactly who I was, but maybe that made it better.
Maybe, yes. Isn't the internet great for that, where it's just the anonymity of being like, hey, I don't know this, and we should have more of that in the physical world, but sometimes with the virtual world, there are upsides to the anonymity as well.
But I think it's really refreshing to be able to say, like, what we're good at and what we're not good at, because, even in our first conversation, Amy Jo, like, I will tell you, everybody thinks I have all the answers, and yet, being the first is exciting in a lot of ways. But it also means that there's no roadmap, and that, there are people you can reach to, but you don't necessarily have a defined mentor. You might have elements of mentors in many different people, which I have, but you can't find that one person and just say, I'm going to walk in the path that you walked in. And that's scary. And when you're a person who people do look up to, it's even scarier, because I've found times when I want to be like, well, I don't want to let anybody down by appearing to not have all the answers. But sometimes, the thing that I'm learning and that I try and remind myself of, though it's not easy, is that true strength isn't never admitting weakness. It's actually admitting weakness when it can make other people strong. And so, I try not to play like I have all the answers, because I think that limits the ways that you can help people, because nobody's perfect, and certainly not me.
I love that phrase, that line. That's so cool. So as we're wrapping up here, I have a short list of rapid fire questions that I ask everyone. And the first is, what are you reading right now?
I'm writing, not reading.
Fair enough.
No, I actually am reading a couple of football books, but it's very things that I wanted to know about some great football minds, and, just curiosity of some of the greatest coaches. But
do you have an all-time favorite book and or football book?
Oh my gosh. One of my favorite books, and I don't have the name of it in front of me, is actually Bill Belichick's books. I think his book, I think he's Brilliant. My all-time favorite book, take me outside of the sport, is The Mists of Avalon. Marion Zimmer Bradley. It's just brilliant. A different way of looking at a story that we all thought we knew. And I think anytime you can do that, it's so refreshing in our society.
Those are good. Awesome. And do you have a name for your children's book or your other book? Just as a heads up for everyone.
Not going to give them out yet.
Okay, fair enough.
Come back to that.
That's cool. We'll have you back on and we'll talk about it when that's time. Okay, so what keeps you up at night?
It depends on what night. Some nights my mind is so racing with, just ideas, that there's so many things that I want to do. And other times it's, when I have those nights of weakness, it's, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough good? And what more could I be doing or should I be doing?
It's interesting. That's a common theme with guests on the show. Am I doing enough? And keeping people up at night. Now, switching gears to a little bit of a lighter question. Maybe, depends on your opinion. Pirates or ninjas? Who's tougher?
Oh my gosh, ninjas. Totally ninjas.
And why would you say that?
Well, in 2010, on the U.S. national team, my number was always 47, but for some reason they gave me 48 and gave 47 to one of my teammates who is awesome and a very dear friend. Her name's Ninji Martin. And I used to joke and I said they gave Ninji 47 because I needed the extra one to make up for the fact that she was like a foot taller than me. They totally called us Ninji and me midget ninja. So I'm just going with they're tougher because,
Because it's part of your DNA.
Yeah. I was the midget ninja because you would never know where I was coming from on a football field. I could hide behind the big girls and then just surprise you and tackle you.
Best relevant answer I've ever received for that question. Nice job. You totally win, even though I'm a Pirates girl. And last question, what advice?
That's cool. Yeah, we'll go with that.
They have a lot of fun. And what advice would you give to your younger self? And you can choose the age.
Oh my gosh. Just to always be willing to play big and that you are not defined by what anybody thinks are your perceived limitations. And in that, with limitations, it would be to realize that it is a blessing to be an and that you don't have to be girls can be pretty and smart and athletic and a whole lot of things. It's not just one. So don't ever minimize your gifts because you feel like you have a bucket. You're not an in a bucket or an inside the box kind of girl, and just own that and love it, and you'll do things that you never even imagined possible.
I love that. I absolutely love that last thought. And thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been incredible. I look forward to hopefully having you back on and we can talk more about your books, plural there, both of them. And just thanks. I appreciate everything you're doing to encourage and empower men and women. And it's really special. And the work you're doing is so important. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I would encourage anybody, don't assume that the people around you, just because they're doing great things, have all the answers. I know that I'm always encouraged when people reach out with ideas, suggestions, opportunities. My website is very simple. It's JenWelter.com. If you have something like that, reach out. You never know. You could be like me and be the assistant, not the assistant coach, and end up making history.
Which is the coolest story ever, that you called on your own behalf. And on Twitter, you are JWelter47.
Absolutely.
And same on Instagram?
It's Welter47 on Instagram, and then Dr. Jen Welter on Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to following along and seeing what your next steps look like.
Absolutely. Thank you as well.
I encourage you to follow Jen on social media and support her in the various projects that she's working on. The more people who can hear her story, the better. I want to hear what your Why Not Now is. Please share it with me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Amy Jo Martin. I'll send a signed copy of my New York Times best-selling book, Renegades Write the Rules, to the first 200 people who listen, rate, and leave an honest review of the podcast in iTunes. And you'll also get a free month subscription from our friends at Headspace. This is only available to Why Not Now listeners. Once you've left a rating and review on iTunes, just email your iTunes handle name and your mailing address to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com, and we'll get your package in the mail to you. For detailed show notes, head to amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. That's where you'll find links to things we discussed on the show, special offers, and how you can keep in touch with guests. Hat tip to my buddies Ash and Devin at Rock Salt Music for our tunes today. You just listened to the talented John Coggins in Let's Go and Let It Ride. And a jump high five to my talented husband, Richard Greer, for producing the show and being patient with me. See you next time. Until then, why not now?